Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be with you this afternoon. It's not often that you can legitimately link the two words war and celebration. Well, today we can, because today we celebrate the end of the Pacific War 70 years ago. Germany had already surrendered in May of 1945, but the war in the Pacific dragged on and seemed to have no end until the words Hiroshima and Nagasaki entered the lexicon. Japan was obliged to surrender, and now the war in the Pacific was over. 70 years ago, Concord was a military hospital. For a moment, imagine how the patients felt. Certainly there was time for great celebration and joy. And that joy was shared across Australia in the many cities and towns who had sent their young men and women to war. For many soldiers on the front line, the news filtered through slowly. Some didn't believe it at first. For a lot of them, war was about all they could comprehend. It had been their only reality for the last 5 or 6 years. And now there was talk of peace. Celebration, certainly, but also relief. No more war, no more carnage, no more destruction, no more deaths and injury. I'm alive, home to the family. In the days that followed the 15th of August, there would have been many other feelings as well. A sense of loss of mates, of family and friends. A sense of determination to make sure that it never happened again. And a sense of making the guilty pay for their crimes. There was also uncertainty about the future. When will I be home? What's waiting for me? But above all, that sense of celebration. History reminds us of who we are and the great events that helped shape our nation. And the Second World War was one of those great events. For many of us in Australia today, it's hard to imagine those times. It was a time of uncertainty and peril. Just a few miles from here, the Japanese attacked ships in the harbour. Our troops went to war in Europe, North Africa, Greece. As the threat of Japan loomed, they came home to new places: Milne Bay, Kokoda, Leahy, Bougainville, Tarakan, many more. Too many were killed in action, and many more were wounded and suffered from physical and psychological wounds for the rest of their lives. It's well that we remember what happened, and also remember the joy and relief that occurred on this day in 1945. The war was over. The threat had gone away, and now it was time to build a new Australia. Geography reminds us of our place in the world. The war in Europe was a reminder of where Australia had come from. But the war in the Pacific was a clear statement of our place in the world and where our future lay. And that war came close to Australia. The cities and towns of our north were relentlessly bombed. The nation feared a Japanese invasion, and our troops were deployed just to the north in New Guinea and the island chains across the Pacific to repel the Japanese advance in a series of prolonged and bloody battles. Our soldiers were held in prisoner of war camps and suffered horribly. But above history and above geography, people define us as a nation. So today in my address I want to talk primarily about people. I could recite the facts of the war, but you can go to Wikipedia and find out about it there. What can we learn about people by studying the war? People like you and I who saw Australia in peril. People like you and I who saw an evil and wanted to put it right. People like you and I who put service to their nation above themselves and made a commitment to Australia. It cost too many their life, and others their physical and mental health. But they defended, they secured, and through their actions they defined modern Australia. Some of them are here with us today, and we should acknowledge that they were a special generation. We owe them our respect and our admiration. They've given us a future. So please have a look around, and if you see a veteran of the Second World War, say g'day, give him a thumbs up, give him a hug if you're close to him. So permission to hug, carry on. I can see a really good hug happening there. Before I go on, can I also ask that you spare a thought for those soldiers, sailors and airmen and women of the Australian Defence Force who today serve our nation in faraway places such as Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Egypt, Israel and the Lebanon, and closer to home in the seas around Australia. They carry forward that legacy of the original Anzacs and the heroes of the Second World War. Over these few years, we're also commemorating what happened in the First World War. We thought that was the war to end all wars. Well, it wasn't, and today we celebrate the end of another war. As I've said, I'm not going to go into the details. Rather, I want to remember the people of the war. There were those on the front lines, those at home, those who supported those deployed on the front, and those who cared for them after they came home broken and damaged from the war. The Second World War was a total war. Everyone was involved and everyone was affected. And today I've chosen to remember an individual, Captain Bede Tongs, Medal of the Order of Australia, Military Medal. Bede died this year on the 14th of January. And he was associated with the works of the Kokoda Track Memorial Walkway through his 3rd Battalion. And as Bede lived in Canberra, I was privileged to meet him on a number of occasions. But our first meeting was, for me, the most memorable. We met in Port Moresby in August of 2002. And Bede was one of 10 World War II veterans who visited Papua New Guinea to mark the 60th anniversary of the Battle of the Kokoda Track. I was there as the Chief of Army and travelled with the group for a short while. It was a privilege to get to know Bede and his mates. Bede and his fellow veterans relived the battles of their youths, and they probably drank a whole lot more beer than they did when they were on the track the first time. I've been lucky during my career to have also been with veterans of the First World War, veterans of our campaigns in Malaya and of the chaos of Crete as they revisited the battlefields of their youth. And each group was different, each had different memories and experiences. And what struck me about the men of Kokoda was the closeness and personal nature of their war. It was fought in the thick jungles of New Guinea, where you could hardly see a few metres in front. You didn't know what was going to happen next. You couldn't see. The nights were as black as they could be. And what struck me as I spoke to these men, that each one of them had a close recollection of holding a mate as he died in their arms. So Bede, as well as being a great soldier and a great bloke, was also a poet. And his poem, What Do You Say to a Dying Man, tells something of his war. What do you say to a dying man? Do you call him Bob or Digger or mate? As you look down at the face you knew so well, and the look in his eyes says, it's late. Just 3 minutes ago he was full of life, firing his Bren from the hip. The platoon attacking as it had many times before, when all of a sudden he's hit. A Japanese sniper so deadly fires from a dark weapon pit, and my best mate falls close to my feet. Tell them I tried, he said. My words of goodbye froze on my lips. On that trip, I was privileged to be with them at Isarava, a small village in the Owen Stanley Ranges just above the village of Kokoda. I wonder now if that was close to where Bob died. Leahy was there with his 9 mates. He was there with the Prime Minister of Australia and the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, where they dedicated a memorial to the men who fought with such great courage to halt the Japanese advance across the Owen Stanley Ranges to Port Moresby. It was a special moment, made more special by the memorial itself. And I know many of you will have been there, probably more than once, and you'll know what I mean when I say it's a special place. It's made up of 4 Australian black granite pillars, each inscribed with a single word. And they read courage, endurance, mateship, sacrifice. And those pillars stand sentinel to the heroic deeds of those who fought in the Pacific War. It's a haunting and impressive place. These words, and the veterans who stood next to them on that day in August 2002, are more important than any historical record of the battles. So my memories are of those magnificent men who stopped the Japanese advance. My memories are of their spirit, their love for Australia and for each other, and the values that drove them forward into battle: courage, endurance, sacrifice and mateship. It's well to remember the battles, but today above all else, we should honour and remember the men who fought and gave their all in the battles. On one of his many visits to Papua New Guinea after the war, Bede wrote another poem, Return to Kokoda, and I'll read just a small portion. I stand again upon this hallowed ground, alone and quiet. Each step upon this track, I know a face is near. For many soldiers trod this mud, and many soldiers' blood consecrated the ground with its scarlet glow. Let's remember that this war got close to Australia. The Japanese were menacing to our north. Our soldiers went forth to repel them, and they fought horrible battles in the solitude of the jungle. They suffered in captivity like places like Changi and the Burma Railway. Let's remember the people, because they were our fathers and grandfathers, our brothers and sisters, our uncles and our mates. Few of them remain today, but they've left us a wonderful legacy of service and sacrifice. They've helped shape Australia and shown how great we can be as a nation, but more importantly, how great we can be as individuals. I'd also ask that today we remember there are new veterans in Australia. And in my capacity as chairman of Soldier On, I see a new generation of veterans returning from contemporary wars, broken and damaged. We know there are 261 of them who are physically wounded and thousands who are psychologically wounded, and we also know there will be more. We're still at war, and the security environment suggests that there'll be more. That means there'll be more wounded to come. And so our work at Soldier On is about recognising the service of our contemporary veterans and supporting them as they return to their lives in Australia. They had our backs, and it's now our turn to have theirs. We aim to inspire them, to enhance their support, to connect them with all Australians and empower them to get on with the rest of their lives. And we're going to do that in concert with Concord Hospital. Concord has a proud history of service to the nation through its veterans and through its community. It was established in 1941 as the 113th Australian General Hospital. So the work of Concord is not yet finished, and we're proud as a charity to be associated with Concord as that work goes on. We look forward to helping build a new future for the hospital in support of a new generation of Australian servicemen and women. Today marks the very day that the war in the Pacific ended. It was a day of joy because the war was over. But it's also a day of reflection for the lives lost and damaged. We reflect on a generation of men and women who saw a challenge and met it. In their brave endeavours, they helped define a nation. We honour them for their service and their sacrifice, and through our own commitment to Australia, we extend to them our thanks and gratitude. I know each one of us here today is proud of them. Well, let's make them as proud of us as we are of them as we build Australia's future and define our place in the world based on their values and their ideals. Thank you.